Says we're live. Let's make sure we're actually live. There we go. Well, guys, thanks for if you're joining us. You're catching a live. We're gonna slowly make the transition to this being a video and an audio podcast. But I figure with our guest today, it'd be good to get it both with video and audio. So if you have questions about public speaking, leave your comments below. I'd love to ask Ken those, and we'll be talking about speaking and communication and all things Ken Davis. Maybe even some comedy. And Ken might be funny,
Yeah,
but
yeah. It's hard. The one line "tell us a joke" is really probably one of the most difficult requests to me. I was on a plane with a doctor one time, and he introduced himself, and I said, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm a doctor." He said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a comedian." He said, "Oh, tell me a joke. Tell me a joke." And I said, "Okay, after you take out my spleen, take out my spleen." It's just hard in some different situations.
yeah, and I couldn't imagine trying to do comedy as a living in today's world either. Um,
Oh my goodness. I don't have a whole lot of trouble, but a lot of my comedian friends have totally stopped doing colleges because they can't say anything that's politically correct. Everything is wrong,
yeah,
So it's tough. But my audiences are usually pretty good, and I do more of the kind of comedy that identifies things in all of our lives that are funny and need to be fixed. And I haven't don't run into a whole lot of problem.
well, well, let's dive in. We're going to do an official podcast interview, and I will do my best to introduce you to the best of my ability, Ken, and we'll do this thing. Just
Okay.
imagine you've heard the fanfare of the intro. We'll put that in post. But, well, as you've heard, you are listening to the Making Elephants Fly podcast, and my name is Terry Weaver. And today we have a guest that I have been working on getting on the show. We've been talking about it off and on for years, and the planets have finally aligned. I have got one of my people that I would put in the hero and mentor and friend category, the great Ken Davis. And Ken is someone who has spent most of his life on stages. Sometimes that's been telling jokes, and sometimes that's been getting a point across. I've seen Ken in small rooms, and I've seen him in arenas in Washington, D.C., speaking to 20,000 teenagers before. And I'm excited to have him on the show today. And as I was telling Ken right before we got started, I literally looked back in my desk, and if you're watching live video, I have my spiral notebook from the Dynamic Communicators workshop that he did at the National Youth Workers Convention in Nashville in 1995. And so
Hmm.
I've known Ken for a little while, and one of the very first books that I picked up was Ken's book, How to Speak to Youth and Keep Them Awake. And it literally changed my life. Much of my life's work is because I met this guy, and I realized, like, wow, this is something I really could do, and like people actually make a living doing it. And so, would you guys do me a favor and welcome my friend and soon to be yours, Mr. Ken Davis, to the podcast? Ken, welcome.
Wow, standing ovation. I love
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Man, how long have you been? How did this whole thing get going for you? How did you get started
What,
speaking and,
do you want the whole story?
or the best parts
Yeah,
of the
okay.
story?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. As a high school student, I was the victim of a thing called bullying. I weighed about 115 pounds. I was skinny as can be. I couldn't play athletics. And I discovered early that if I could make people laugh, they wouldn't hurt me. And in high school, I made people laugh in an English class in a very inappropriate way. I said some extremely bad words, and the teacher made me stay after school. And when I had to wait for my parents. And back then, by the way, when your parents came to get you at school, man, they didn't. They didn't bring lawyers. They brought weapons of mass destruction. You know, 2x4s with barbed wire wrapped around them. But before my parents got there, this English teacher said, "Son, look at me." And I looked at her, and she said, "God has given you a gift, and you're using it to destroy my class, and that ends today." And she made me go out for speech, man.
Huh.
Humorous interpretation. And I went out for speech and won all but one contest that I ever entered. And that was the very beginning. I was in a kind of a youth ministry after that, and it required speaking. And then I realized there were so many requests for me to come to other places. I realized I had to take that step, and I did. And that was over 50 years ago, and it has been a ride, let me tell you.
Yeah, man. I remember getting a brochure in the mail back in the day when they sent those things out. I was a youth pastor at the time. I was 18. I had just taken the job, and much like you, I had a couple of teachers that said, "Man, you really have a gift for running your mouth. Maybe you should do something with this, because you're not very good at anything else." And and some of that was sarcasm, and some of that was just disbelief. Um, and I realized that speaking was something that I loved, and like you said, I believed it was a God given gift. And I remember standing on stage. I think I was 15 or 16. And for those of you who are in the church, you'll recognize this place I'm about to mention. I was at Bob Jones University, and which is not known for a lot of free thinking.
They let you in there? They let
They
you
let
into
me in
Bob
there.
Jones?
It was their what they called their Preacher Boys competition,
Oh my goodness.
and I spoke about the woman at the well and how the most significant thing isn't not just what happened to her; it's what she left behind at the well, because the Bible says she left her water pot. And my kind of invitation to the crowd was, what do you need to leave behind to accomplish the mission that you've been given? And Bob the Third came up on stage and says, "You're the winner. Here's a trophy." Um, and then offered me a free scholarship. I didn't end up going to Bob Jones University. I somehow ended up at the National Youth Workers Convention in a 2-day seminar by Ken Davis, and kind of began traveling for literally the next almost 15, 18 years, traveling all over the country doing school assemblies, and using a lot of the things that you taught me. And I look, and for one, I had a lot better handwriting in 1995. But I remember, I took notes. I took notes all in the columns, and it's all marked up. It was only a partial. I think it was one of those seminars where it was like, this was your weekend long thing, and you only taught like half of
Yeah.
it. Um, but I still remember those things, and I've probably read how to speak to teenagers to keep them awake probably 5 times.
Hmm.
Um, I've read it on planes. I've read it stuck in the Atlanta airport on Delta layovers, just because I knew that had been given a gift, and I wanted to use the words that I say to it. I knew the power that my words had, and that if I could aim them a little better, that they would have more impact. And so I personally just want to thank you for that. I know that um, the life of traveling to speak and communicate is not always the most glamorous thing in the world. Everyone thinks, man, I sure wish I could travel and get on airplanes. And uh, one of my favorite conversations I had with you and I, um, and our buddy McNair Wilson were getting together for sushi, and I asked you where you were going the next day to speak, and you said, "You know what? Can I be honest with you, Terry? I have no idea. Someone will tell me on the way to the airport." And
That's right.
it, you know, sometimes saying yes to the things we know we have to do is kind of disorienting, because we know we're chasing something that we're meant to do, we're designed to do. Um, Man, I guess, what was kind of the minute where you kind of knew that, like, this was something you were going to not just do like for fun because you were good at, but it was how you were going to make your living.
The phone kept, well, I was making my living doing it for YFC, which was the youth organization I was telling you about. But the moment that I decided that I was going to make a living doing it by just on my own, just doing that, not working for somebody, but doing it on my own, was I couldn't get the telephone to stop ringing, and my job wouldn't allow me to take all of the requests, and the requests just kept coming in, and so I just took the leap, man, and I never had to, I've been very fortunate. I've never had to pick up the phone and make a call or have an agent or somebody out there going, uh, will you please bring Ken Davis in? Um, it just, I could hardly keep up with the requests that were coming in. So I've been very, very fortunate and blessed in that regard. But that was it. The phone ringing, not being able to keep up with the requests that were coming.
What do you think? Because you sort of balanced this weird, part of what you did was like in churches, part of what you did was in comedy, and part of what you did was in corporate America talking about speaking. How did you kind of balance that? Because it kind of goes against all the norms of like, pick one lane and stay in it, and you've kind of done the
Yeah.
opposite.
Well, I didn't pick any of those lanes. They were picked for me. Um, I had a fee for faith based organizations, and I had a fee for corporate, and I answered those calls. And I think that my career has been a combination of, I'm going to say some things here, and I don't want people to be offended by it. I'm a comedian, okay? But comedians are a dime a dozen. You can get them anytime, anywhere. I'm kind of a preacher. And when I say preachers are a dime a dozen, I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just mean that there's a lot of preachers out there. And I'm also an inspirational speaker. And I mixed all three of those together. When I would go to faith-based organizations, of course, my everything I did, the comedy and the way I structured my speech would be aimed toward helping people understand the good news of the gospel better. When I went to corporate organizations, I told my story. And my story involves the power of what faith in Christ has done for me. I didn't preach to them, but part of the stories involved that. Part of the stories involved church and some of the things that happened there. And some of the stories involved the stumbling I did as I created my own business. So I focused the things in the direction that I was headed. There were times, by the way, Terry, when people called me and said, "Can you do this?" And I said, "No, but I can do this." That corporations in particular. I would say, "No, but I can do this." And I can't think of a time where they said, "Well, we don't want that." Um, so I never, well, I shouldn't say I never stepped in where I didn't know what I was doing. I had a guy call from Florida one time. He was the head of a chiropractic association. And I'd never done anything corporate before. I'd done high school assemblies like you. I'd done churches where they give you a love offering. It's a plate filled with love, very
Yes,
little else. But anyway, um, so
very
when I
very little
called the
offering.
corporation, yeah, when the corporation called, I thought, wow, I might be able to make 200, $300 here. This is great. And so I called my wife into the room. I muffled the phone, and this is the way you did it then, by the way. You muffled it like this, because
Hmm.
it was one of those phones. And I said, "This is a guy from Florida, and he wants me to come down and speak to a whole bunch of chiropractors. We've been to chiropractors. We know how much they make. What should I do?" And she said, "You can't go because that's our vacation, and family's more important." So I went back on the phone. I told the guy, "Listen, I'd love to come, but we have a family vacation planned during that time, and I won't be able to come." He called two more times. Each time I had to tell him no. When he called, I'm sorry, he called a second time. When he called the third time, Weaver, and this is a true story. I told him the same thing, and he said, "Well, we've been talking, and we would love to have you come, and we'll pay your fee, and what is your fee? And I swallowed hard and I said, $1,500. I'd never seen $1,500 in my life. And he said, great, if you'll come, this is what we'll do. We'll put you up on the beach. We'll pay all your expenses to fly your family down, put you up on the beach for a week in this nice condo situation right on the beach, if you'll come and speak to us. And just then my wife walked into the room and I put my hand over, because she was adamant. I put my hand over the phone and I said, it's him again. I said, and he wants me to come, and he said he'd pay us 1,500 and fly us all down there and put us up on the beach for a week. I don't know what to do. And she said, take it, stupid. And I did. She changed her mind.
Yeah.
That was that. So, but I got to tell you what happened. I remember where I was going now. Forgive this old mind. I'd never spoken at that time to a corporation before. So I read two books, one by Zig Ziglar, See You at the Top, and another one by Charles Tremendous Jones called Life is Tremendous. And I plagiarized their material because I didn't know what to do. I gave the stuff that I'd read in their book to this organization. I know now that I bet you there were 20% of those people who had read those books or seen them before or whatever and realized what I was doing. But anyway, when I got done, standing ovation, absolutely standing ovation. And the guy called me up to the front and stood on stage, thanked me for coming, and he said, now we're going to open up for questions. I was dead. There were maybe two questions I could answer, but I had entered a field I didn't know anything about, giving some points that somebody else had given. So now if somebody called like that, I would ask them, what do you want me to do? And if it was outside of my skill set, and I learned a lot of things about corporate organizations and what they need and everything later. But if it was outside of my skill set, I would just say, I can't do that, but let me tell you what I'd be glad to do for you. And then I would tell them, and almost without fail, they would say, come on down.
That's
and then
amazing.
I would say, do you have a condo for me?
On the beach. I would love. I don't know that I've ever been to a business conference, and you'll laugh. I think you'll find this funny. I don't know that I've ever been to an event that I've not heard somebody quote Zig Ziglar.
Yeah. He
Um,
was an amazing man.
yeah, and Zig always. I mean, there's a what the Zig has one quote. The if you give what is it? If you give everyone what they want, they'll give you what you need. I think that's something like that. I'm sure I butchered it, but there's a quote like that, and it almost appears every time you go to a conference. And so I think people are still. You're probably not the only one using Zig Ziglar material.
Yeah. But those wise people said, Zig Ziglar said this.
Yeah.
And I didn't say that. And I've learned a lot about that. I would never do that again unless there was a condo on the beach offered.
Unless your price is still the same. That's funny.
No, it isn't.
It's got to be a bigger condo, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be a bigger condo, but it's got to be bigger cash. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and that it's interesting. A lot of people talk about the price that it costs to pay speakers, and I tell people I normally speak for free, but what I do charge for is the time that it takes to prepare, the time that it takes to travel, the fact that I've got, regardless of I've stayed in some of the nicest hotels in the world, and at the end of the day, they're still just a hotel. With the exception of maybe the Westin, the bed is normally incredibly uncomfortable. There's a strange piece of furniture that they've managed to put the TV in, off in the corner, and there's a mirror and there's a bathroom and hot water that kind of works. That's pretty much every hotel, whether it's a Hampton, a Hilton, or a Ramada, or Red Roof Inn, or the Four Seasons. I mean, they're almost in every country that I've ever been to. They're at the end of the day, the lobby's normally nicer, or sometimes you have to pay for your eggs instead of you get the ones for free that you're pretty sure that they're not eggs. That's in the the continental breakfast.
Yep.
Uh, but yeah, like it's just super interesting that um, just how much all goes into preparing to speak and traveling to
Oh
speak.
yeah.
And I mean, I wouldn't trade what I get to do, and I love what I get to do, but it doesn't still lessen, the amount of work that it
Yeah.
is. Um,
Well, especially if you do it right. You've heard me say this before, and you know that our whole speaking course is designed to help people design a speech with a purpose,
mhm.
and to plan it in such a way that it leads to the purpose, and to deliver it with the kind of passion that makes it believable. That's what we're all about. That is not easy. That it just isn't easy. Aim at nothing and you'll hit it every time. The old style for preparing a speech kind of went like this: you research, and then you list all the things you want to say, and then you put them in a certain order, and then you deliver your speech. And what we teach is that you research, you list all the things you want to say. Sounds kind of like the other one, doesn't it? Except then you ask why. What do I want to accomplish? What is my objective? It's amazing the power that comes to a speech that has a purpose. And then you design your speech in such a way, first of all, you eliminate all those things you listed, you eliminate anything that doesn't move you toward that purpose, toward that objective.
Hmm.
And then you arrange the rest in the most powerful way with the most powerful illustrations to lead to the objective that you wanted. And I just have to say this, forgive me, you get me started and I go. The objective has to be audience centered.
Mhm.
I often say this: communication only happens at the intersection of where what you want to say intersects with what your audience needs, what will enable them in some way
Mhm.
or help them in some way.
Yeah, and
So
this same thing
yeah, that
applies
doesn't come easy.
if you're talking on
I'm
a.
sorry, bud.
This same thing applies if you're talking on a stage to thousands or a conference room with 6 people.
That's
Um,
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And all of us have been to places where we listened and maybe we were even entertained. We did a survey one time and this was back when I was doing programs for young people. And we found out that, let me think of the numbers. I think it was 70% or 75% of the people who came out of a situation where they had just heard a speech had no idea what the speaker wanted to communicate. It was just a bunch of stories. And sometimes they liked some of those stories, but they couldn't identify it. Then we did a survey with the speakers and found out that 50% of them had no idea of why they were speaking.
yep.
They had never considered, what do I want to accomplish with this talk? Or they thought, I want to accomplish everything with this talk,
Yes.
which is just as destructive.
Yeah, and a lot of my pastor friends, when they prepare a message or a talk, and a lot of them are preparing hundreds of talks a year.
Oh
the
yeah.
The majority of them are over preparing. Most of the time, it's
Yes.
like that's not a message, that's a series, my friend. Like less.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. I was sharing this with someone the other day, and I'll share it with you just because I think you played a part in this. That I'll never forget. I was walking in the Atlanta airport, and this student came up to me, and they're like, I know you. I have no idea what your name is, but I know this. I know you came to my youth camp, and here's what you said, and here's what I did with what you said. And they repeated back my repeatable statement. And, like, and heck, I don't even remember what it was. I don't even remember what they told me because, there's a lot, we have lots of those experience. But for that student, they didn't know my name, but they knew what action I called them to. Um, and it was probably tied to an object or a set of words, and they remembered that. And for me, that's the greatest compliment that anyone that ever hears me speak.
Yep.
I don't care if you forget my name, but if I'm there, I'm normally tasked with the job of getting you to move you towards something, whether it's action or a change in beliefs or a change in perspective or to take action on something or to actually go and do something. And our goal as communicators is definitely to help people, remember the mission, remember the purpose, remember the objective, so that they
Mm-hmm.
hear what we say and remember it and apply it. And there are some people who are masters at this, and there are some people. I know Andy Stanley frequently talks about something that he learned from Gary Smalley. That if it's memorable, it's repeatable. If it's repeatable, it's memorable. And that if you can create statements that people clearly understand, that they can, if you can just make one clear, and a lot of times you only really can just make one point, but one big point that you want to make, and you know that you've been successful when they come back and tell you, I've been doing a talk, and I tell this, it's illustration based, about how Walt Disney spent a weekend with a friend, and literally how he had this idea for Disneyland in his head, and he got the idea out of his head, and he had someone draw a map. And I said, all leaders need maps. All leaders have amazing things they need in their head. And I'll never forget it. A few weeks ago, someone came up to me after I gave that talk and said, I need you, Terry Weaver, to help me draw a map. Can you help me draw a map? And I was like, well, we actually have a program for that. And which was my point. I wanted them to take action and actually learn how to get the things that are in their head and actually make them happen. And it's not a skill that you master overnight. It's you master throughout years of trying to take, because most of us approach a talk with like a lot of pressure and a lot of, like you did with, grabbing the nearest Zig Ziglar book on the shelf. You want to make the people that are
Mm-hmm.
bringing you in happy. But it's often simplicity that wins. That just really clear messaging around what you want them to do and how you want them to react, how you want them to feel. And I love that you've boiled this down to what you call the SCORE method. And I think you've kind of refined it over the years, but
Yeah.
it started in this how to speak to youth and keep them awake, and it's in your book that's on Amazon, that you wrote on speaking, and it's something you're actually going to be teaching. We're doing an event here in Nashville called The Thing, and it's for people who want to be speakers and authors. It's called Pages, Stages, and Wages. And I am super honored that you're going to be joining us and you're going to be teaching this, because I have a lot of people that come up to me and say, Terry, I really want to be speaking. I want to learn how to be a better communicator. I want to learn how to speak. I want to learn how to get my message heard. I want when I get a chance to share the thing that I'm most passionate about, I want to be effective at it. And so I genuinely think, Ken, that you're one of, if not the best in the world at teaching this. And I'm super honored that you're going to be joining us here in Nashville the first weekend of June. And
Yeah.
you've worked your schedule
And I
around, and
won't.
you're joining us. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I'm very excited about the condos. Thank you.
You're not even staying. You're going to like a Christian comedian event in the great state of Ohio right after it, I think.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
um, yeah, we both live in the greater Nashville area, and I don't know that either one of us could afford to buy a condo in Nashville right now. It's
That's
Nashville real
true.
estate's gotten out of hand quick. Uh, when did you guys move to Nashville?
The day we turned on the television in our new home, we turned it on and watched the first airplane hit the towers in New York.
Okay,
So that's the day that we settled in, and that I kind of remember it because of that. So that's been what, 20 some years ago.
yeah, that's the same time
And
we moved to Nashville on Valentine's Day of 2001. So we beat you by a couple of
yeah,
months, but yeah,
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 we all remember. Seems like one time in history that we'll all remember where we were, what we were doing.
yep,
I remember that day very clearly. I didn't know what to do, but all I know is I ended up with Rick White at the People's Church that night, and praying and begging and hoping for hoping for peace, and that was the end of it. And man, it was only the beginning. And but yeah, we've loved our time in Nashville. It's been great to be so central. Back in 2001, the Nashville airport was a tiny little thing. Now when we fly out of the Nashville airport, it feels like you need a shuttle to get to your gate. But But man,
Yeah.
what talk us a little through like what are some of the core? Give us kind of an intro to the score method, which you teach in your workshop that people can take online. You do an event, and we'll post. You do an event with our buddy Paul Klein to teach this, and you're going to be teaching it at the thing in Nashville. Give us kind of an intro to why, how this framework came to be, and why, and what made you do it.
No. I think how it came to, first of all, the framework, I need to help you understand this. In teaching this, it is a 3-day process, basically. So it's hard in 1 hour to give all of the details to it, but I'm going to try to outline it in the best way that I can. Um, it it is designed specifically to help people craft a speech. Hold that book up again, that red one, that will help them prepare with focus, deliver with clarity, and speak with power. And if you're watching, that's something to write down. You know how to prepare with focus. That you just got through saying it. Usually we should be just headed for one single point. We don't call it a point because usually that point will require other points to bring it to fruition, if you understand what I mean.
Right.
For instance, if you said, my point is going to be to convince people to take that first step of faith. Well, your speech then will have other points
Right.
that help people be encouraged or motivated to take action on that. Um, now, to get back to it, SCORE was originally developed as an acronym. It's two R's. S stands for subject. You should know what your subject is. Do not speak on your subject. It's too big. If you say, I'm going to speak on joy, or I'm going to speak on honesty, it's too big.
Yeah.
If you want to speak about the benefits of being honest in business, I've got a friend, David Hortzeger, who makes an unbelievable living. He came to SCORE when he was 19, and I think he was 19, and he came when he was 21, and he invited me to one of his conferences. He's the highest paid non-celebrity speaker in the United States of America.
Hmm.
And he wrote a book called The Truth Edge, and it is 7 pillars. Now, when you listen to his speech, tell me what you're going to hear. What is a word you're going to hear 7 times?
Pillar.
That's right. And that stays in your mind, and it creates a picture. I want to create a building. I want to create something that's strong. Here are 7 pillars that will help you create that. So instead of just having a subject, it's too big. Instead of just talking about honesty and truth, he has created how to affect the bottom line by building a business using honesty and truth. I'm sorry, it's not truth, it's trust. Forgive me. I'm 75 years old. I don't even remember what I had for breakfast. It's trust, 7 pillars of trust. And so he's narrowed it down. When you get your subject, think about an amount of information people are able to handle and respond to. And that ain't much.
Right.
Rarely does a preacher have someone come to them at the back of the church afterwards and go, "Oh, I enjoyed that, Pastor. I wish you'd have gone another hour." And sometimes what we do is we have speaking where it's a message, and then in conclusion, and then the closing prayer where you pick up the stuff you didn't get in the rest of the message. Narrow it down. Make it make it something people can actually carry home without having to order a truck or a limo or something like that. Then, so S stands for subject, C stands for that central theme, that narrowing it down. Think like a funnel. Then you come up with the nugget, the objective. This is what you're going to be driving at with your speech. This is the purpose we talked about when I was talking about purpose, plan, and passion. This is the purpose. You want to accomplish this. It will be either to move people to action, to persuade people in some way, or to enable them in some way. If you're giving a persuasive speech, you're going to be moving people to a certain action, convincing them that something needs to be done, convincing them that a certain thought is correct. If you're giving an enabling speech, you're going to show them how to do something, how to build a good business. That's kind of what my friend David Hortzeger does with his 7 pillars of. Tell me what it was,
Trust.
because I want to. Yeah, okay. I want to see what your brain is like. 7 pillars of trust to make an organization more sustainable, to keep your employees happy. You've got to build these, and so he's enabling people. Whereas if I were trying to convince you to drive carefully because of the consequences of, or to avoid your distracted driving because of the consequences of distracted driving, I would be persuading you to take a certain kind of action, to behave in a certain way, to avoid certain consequences. So you've got the objective, you've got it down, you've nailed it. Leave the stuff out that isn't going to lead toward it. Then you build a rationale, and this is the body of your speech that convinces people to believe your objective, or convinces people that they'd like to take the steps to learn how to ride a horse, or whatever the enabling kind of thing you're going to give. And then you illuminate that with powerful illustrations that take the points of your speech leading to the objective from the brain to the heart, that cause people to have an emotion about that, or causes them, like you and I do a lot of times, to make them laugh. I walked into my house one day, and my little daughter, who's now not little anymore, she has 4 grandchildren, and she's got her tooth tied to a doorknob, and it's on a fishing line, and she's slamming the door, and it isn't pulling her tooth, but you can hear the fishing line going bang, bang. And this kid, it's just a kid, and she's doing that 2 or 3 times, and I said, "What are you doing?" And kind of snotty, she turned to me and said, "I'm pulling my tooth." And I said, "Come here, I want to see if it's loose." She said, "I can't come there, I'm tied to the door." And she, boing, did it again. And I went over there and felt her tooth, and I said, "It's not loose." And she said, "It will be." And she did it again. And I said, "What? Stop it." I said, "You're going to hurt yourself." And she said, "Leave me alone, Dad. I need money." The point, when we're talking to kids, oftentimes when we're communicating with teenagers or youth, we've got to read between the lines, because what they're saying or doing may not be exactly what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And people tell me they remember that from years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's
So
she's
you
she's an
bring it
adult
to
now,
their,
so
yep, yeah, oh yeah, she knows now. The final thing in SCORE, there's you got the 2 R's, the resources and the rationale and the resources. Then the final letter in SCORE is evaluation, and this is so important. Do you know that we have speakers that make millions of dollars come to the workshop?
oh yeah,
Why? Why?
because they constantly believe that they want to be better. They
They
want to
want
be
to be better.
yeah.
They never stop seeking excellence. I really believe this. The day you say, "I don't need to improve anymore," you put one foot in the grave.
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
certainly become less of a communicator, less of a whatever you are going to be than you would be if you continued to seek excellence.
Yeah, and I think
So that's kind of an overview.
yeah, and I think that evaluation piece is, it's not just like self evaluation, but having other people and say, hey, I mean, McNair and I have traveled together a lot, like you and him have, and every time we're around each other, we're always saying, hey, is there anything I could have done better? Did I miss something? Was there a misstep? What could I have made clear? And we normally,
Yeah.
we normally razz each other because most of the time, once you're at this for a while, you find out that you're your own worst critic. In fact,
Yep.
one of the stories that I love that McNair tells is a story. It was probably that same time when I heard you speak at the DCLA convention, and he tells a story of you and him being in DC and you speaking and getting off stage thinking you had totally bombed, and you didn't.
Yep.
And he, in his perspective, and everyone else in the room's perspective, was that you brought the house down, that you delivered. Um, and I think evaluation also helps us there because it's really easy. It's really easy to become too critical and not,
Yeah.
not cut yourself a break and realize that, I think there's a certain point where, once you kind of get on stage and whatever your method is, whether you have like full on written notes or you're using slides, or if you're using, a lot of times I'll use a method. I kind of call it the toolbox approach, where if I'm speaking somewhere and I kind of have, you know, I know when I know what the objective is, and a lot of time it's a similar objective. I'll kind of have a list of 4, 5, 6 things written down on a postcard with a Sharpie, and that'll be all the notes that I'll have because it's something that I've done over and over and over again. And the only thing actually I'll write down is a quote, so I don't butcher it like I did the Zig Ziglar quote earlier,
Yeah.
because I want to get that right.
Yeah.
But whatever that method is, as long as once you kind of the important is knowing what that central theme and objective is, so that when you
Yeah.
get up there, so you're able to clearly say, today, here's what we're going to do today, because your audience wants to know, kind of what they're in for. You don't have to give them the whole preview.
And they want, yeah, and they want to know as you move, they want to see you moving toward that objective.
Hmm.
They want to see that happen. You know, there's another thing that Nair says. I just thought of it, and forgive me for interrupting you, but if I didn't, I'd forget it. And this is part of the excellence thing and the evaluation thing is if you're going to give a new speech, when you construct it, make it oiful. Have you heard him say that?
Yes.
On your feet out loud.
Hmm.
Do it on your feet out loud. That does a couple of things. Number one, it helps you say things that you wrote down that can never be said with the lips. Say black bug's blood 5 times. You may have that written down. You can't say it. You'll be blocking in place.
Yeah.
You can't do it. The other thing that it does is it allows you to time your speech so that you'll know exactly how much time you have. How many times have you, Terry, honestly, written a speech or prepared a speech and you go, I don't have enough material. I just don't have enough. And then as you deliver the speech, your creativity takes over. Things come to your mind you never thought of while you were writing it. And suddenly your time is just about up and you haven't covered some
Oh,
of the stuff you wanted to cover.
absolutely. And a lot of times it comes down to the environment that you inherit as a communicator, which a lot of times you have to shift your entire. I spoke at an event a few weeks ago, and I was about the third or fourth speaker with no breaks. And the person before me read their slides the whole time they were on stage for 31 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I could either hand out blankets and just tell everyone to take a nap for my entire time, or I could, I call it, I went full John Maxwell, which is something I never do. And it's like, all right, I'm going to go old school 1974 Southern Baptist John Maxwell. Everybody stand up, say hi to your neighbor, tell them they look good. Repeat after me. I did that whole thing because I knew literally I was either do that or get someone to do like calisthenics, because I knew if I didn't get the room moving, that it didn't matter what I had to say or how great it was,
Yep.
that I wasn't going to be able to deliver that truth that I thought was really important, that I had prepared a lot and put a lot of energy in and made a lot of effort to get there, that I wasn't going to be able to deliver that truth unless I literally shifted how the room felt and how the room,
Yep.
um, and a lot of times we don't have control over that. We get our time slot and we have to go. And so, yeah, you're right. Like I I always I almost always feel like I don't have enough material and almost always end up with too much.
Yep.
Um,
We encourage people when they time it to then reduce the material to about 7 minutes less because it is going to stretch. It is going to stretch 7 to 10 minutes less. And guess what? If you end early, they don't take that percentage out of your paycheck.
No.
What they want is something that their students or that the audience or that their corporate people are going to be able to take home that will be a benefit to them. And that's where communication takes place. That's where it happens.
Yeah.
I got you mentioned another thing about the room. I'm sorry, I'm
No.
interrupting you all the time.
No.
Go ahead. Um, uh, the it's important that you help set the scene yourself by making sure people introduce you in the right way. Now, you did a great thing here with your podcast in that you kind of got people excited. You told them to, welcome, give a good welcome to, and there's people out there laughing because they know this is just a video. I can't hear them clapping, but inside I just feel like they were all standing. I know they were just on their feet,
Yeah.
standing ovation. But anyway, that changes how they start listening.
Yes.
2 stories real quick. When I did high school assemblies, I finally had to write introductions for every principal.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I was a comedian and I used a lot of humor. And one of these guys came out one time and he went, "Okay, sit down. Blake, so help me, sit down." And then he looked at the whole audience and he said, "I don't want any laughing. I don't want any moving. I don't want a sound to come out of you guys until our guest is done." And you step into that, and what do you do? The only thing I could have done, which I didn't, is to make fun of him.
Yeah.
Start out with a joke and make fun of him. The other one was a radio person who said there were about 2,000 people in this audience, and she came out and said, "I don't want to be here. My grandma died this week, and I had this dog, this German Shepherd dog that had been my best friend for years, and we had to put him down. But Ken Davis is here, and he can probably help us. Welcome, Ken Davis." You kidding me?
You can't make that up.
No.
Yeah, which is why when I did school assemblies, I had them introduce the assembly, and then I used a video intro for me. And I actually,
That's smart.
yeah, and because then I had musicians as part of my tour that we were traveling with back when we did school assemblies all the time, and so, I think the number one thing you can do as a communicator is know that that's what you're there to do, is communicate, and do everything you can to set yourself up to not fail. And introductions really, and, I will say this, and McNair and I talk about this all the time. The worst thing you can do with the first 30 seconds you have on stage is to talk about yourself.
Yep.
The best thing you could do is tell a story or use an illustration that gets their attention. 90% of the time, the best way to be an effective communicator is to do the opposite of what people are expecting you to do. People are expecting you to go, "Well, I'm Ken Davis, and I'm from Nashville, Tennessee," which I know you're going to start with a story, or you're going to start with a joke, or you're going to start with something of how you tripped and fell on your way down the stairs to be there, because you want to get the room. You want to make, you're almost, I think, like in this, especially that first minute, you're trying to let the people in the audience know that you're there because you care, and you're going to do your best to make this the best 30 minutes or whatever amount of time you have for them, And to use school assemblies as a joke, my first joke that I told was always like, "Hey, before we get started today, I want to apologize because I know many of you right now are deeply missing math and history class." So I kind of set them up by saying, "Hey, whatever we do for the next hour, it's going to instantly be better than anything else you would normally be doing at 11:45 this morning."
Yeah.
And it sort of set the expectation of like, okay, this guy gets it. We had to come to this thing. We knew that we're captives in this. It wasn't an optional school assembly. We had to come. And so I think it's what's really interesting about communication as it's changing. You mentioned they're not going to pay you less. Years ago, people would expect speakers to come in for 45 minutes or an hour. And now, with kind of the rise of TED Talks, we're seeing people want speakers to speak 20 and 30 minutes. And I truly
Hmm.
believe that the less time you have, the more effective of a communicator you have to be. It's
Hmm.
much harder to give a 20-minute talk than it is a 60-minute talk, because you have to get that objective super, super clear and really, make sure that you're only sticking to that and not going too far outside of the lines.
Yeah. I, I had one of the things I wrote for the principal to say was this guy has performed in Hollywood. He has um, rubbed elbows with movie stars. He is a member of the Magicians Association of America, and he has taken time to be away from the people that are important like that to be with us. This is the best. This is the best speaker you will ever hear in your life. Please welcome Ken Davis. Then I would get up and I would grab the mic and I would go, excuse me, um, and I'd reach around, scratch my rear end, and rub my nose and hem and haw around, and you could see the whole audience going, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible." And then I would identify what they were feeling,
Yeah.
and it was so fun. One time, a kid came up after that assembly, and he said, "I have something for you." And I didn't know what it was. It was kind of green and soft, and he put it in my hand. And I said, "What is this?" And he said, "It's a tomato. It's pretty rotten." And he said, I really enjoyed the assembly. This is what I'm giving to you. And I said, "Thank you." He said, "You were going to get it one way or another, but I'm glad to give it to you this way." I loved teenagers, man. They were so
They're
straightforward and
so
honest
honest
about
and so
stuff.
clear and
Yeah.
so like,
Yeah.
and I think, a lot of people that I know that are communicators that got their start, speaking to teenagers, I think they're
Well,
great
what?
at it because they're just honest. They're
Yeah. And what a place to cut your teeth.
Yeah.
You can say something funny or interesting and then not do well for about 5 or 6 minutes with adults, and they'll kind of hang with you.
Mm-mm.
But you got to keep teenagers on the string all the time
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter that you were good in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, you
It's
got to stay
these
good.
3 minutes that make the difference.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I appreciate that you have not only taken what you know and used it for your own good, but you've put it in a system so that other people can use it and learn from it. And that's that's what leadership is taking the things that we know and passing them on to others. And I think I'm super grateful that you know that you've done that. One of the things that I think you do better than anyone I know can is, and I'll kind of make this one of our kind of wrap up questions. And I think it probably comes from your background in comedy, because I think what makes comedians great is their ability, because at the end of the day, comedy is just noticing. Comedians are just professional noticers. They're people who are literally freeze famming in life and going, man, that's funny if I tell it the right way. How do you think, what is one way that we as communicators um, can get better illustrations, tell better stories, use those things to not just be funny but be effective?
Well, you nailed it, man. You said it in your introduction to this question. It is to live with your eyes open, because there are things all around us that are hilarious. I have had great fun with the mask thing. Um, I have gone probably to about 10 events with the biggest gas mask you've ever seen that covers the entire head. Take that off. There's a mask underneath that. Take that off. I have a pacifier in my mouth. I don't even say it. I don't have to say anything. People know. And the audience that I was speaking to, not a mask in there. And this was in the middle of the COVID thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I told them that it was okay. I said, "You come up afterwards, hug me, whatever you need to do, shake my hand. I'm not going to be worried." And I said, that this was, I've just remembered, I forgot this. I said to them, "I don't worry about me. I'm safe. I had my second vasectomy on Friday." And I didn't realize that I said that, but the place exploded. I didn't know I'd said it. And then some guy yelled, "You only need one." But they were great. It was a very, very uh, a faith-based, pretty strict audience. But they reminded me. This is what I love when you mess up like that, and you have people who realize that you didn't say that to be shady or anything like that. It was an accident. And I got more comments on that after that thing. I just love audiences that forgive. I want to say one more thing. Don't allow the trolls to discourage you.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, I tell some stories about swinging the arm at the children in the back, and I got a 4-page letter when I was a young dad. They're back there fighting, and I'm trying to get them to stop. And I got a lady who wrote me a long letter saying, "You, I don't. How can you call yourself a Christian?" And when a letter starts like that, by the way, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, after 4 pages,
Especially,
she
what's
says,
interesting that people write stuff like that and expect anybody else to read it because, really smart
"Yeah,
people, which I wouldn't always put, a lot of people just throw that away and go, like, I'm not even going to.
yeah." Well, that's what you kind of, well, if there's something in there that's good, but if there isn't, she said all you did was encourage people to do child abuse to their children. And at the end, I tell people you're quieter than that audience was because a lot of you we're going to jail because there's a parent that hasn't reached back there to stop their kids from fighting. But anyway, um, here's what's interesting. I probably have received 100,000 more letters, messages, texts, whatever, talking about the benefits that came to people, saving lives, people who were ready to commit suicide. I wrote the book Fully Alive, and people's lives have been saved by that. You get one letter like that, and that's what you obsess over for the
Yes.
next month or so. Don't do it. Don't do it. Put it aside. If there's something in there you can learn, great. Still, put it aside. Don't communicate with that person, and just push forward because the 100,000 letters are where you're really at.
Yeah, I remember your Fully Alive talk that you did when you went around and kind of promoted the book. One of my favorite talks that you've ever done. Powerful book that Ken wrote. I'm sure there's still copies up on Amazon that his book Fully Alive, and I think Ken has personified that, just living life fully alive. Like life is meant to be lived at full volume, at full blast, and till the end.
Without
Uh,
yeah,
and
without a mask.
without a mask. Uh, yeah, it'll be. We're recording this the week that we don't have to do that on airplanes anymore. It'll be nice to breathe on a plane again. And we always end the podcast, Ken, with a couple of questions, and
Good.
um, that I kind of ask everybody. And this next question's kind of evolved, but I'm going to ask you this specifically. What advice would you give yourself if you could go back and talk to young Ken Davis that was just starting his speaking career? What would you tell him?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I'm going to try to answer that without thought, but that's a profound question. I think I would say this: when you begin traveling, travel with someone who can take care of the details, someone who can keep you straight um, in your life. And that's one of the things that I would say. And then the other thing that I would say is never forget that it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about that thing in Washington, D.C. I thought I screwed up the whole thing, but I was trying to get young people to take the first step of faith. And I went backstage, and the director of that entire thing, I told him, "I'm sorry, I will never speak again. I'm sorry that I ruined this for you." And we had invited kids that wanted to take that step to come down. And he said, he took me back up the steps and we opened the curtain, and there were hundreds and hundreds of kids coming from everywhere.
Hmm.
So it's not about you. If you're talking faith, if you're trying to get people in that direction, you've got the best partner in the world who created the world, who's going to do what he wants to do, even when you make little mistakes. And
Hmm.
he'll work, sometimes he works best through those. So it's not about you. You don't have to be scared. What will people think of me? Just walk up there thinking, what do I have to give? And go from there. That would have saved a lot of years of anxiety, and it certainly would have made me throw away the letter after it came.
Well, and I think just that it's not about you concept. If more people would go into talks and speeches or whatever you want to call them, messages, that with the idea that it's not about what you have to say, but about the person that's sitting in the audience.
That's
And
right.
and here's the reality that a lot of us do work that, and if you've ever done school assemblies, literally are the most humbling thing I've ever done in my life.
Yep. Yep.
And there's nothing more humbling than completing a school assembly and having a kid come up to you at the end and say, I tell this story of a kid named Joey in my book, Making Elephants Fly, and how Joey came up to he was covered. I thought he had sweated from the band, but he was covered in tears. And he said no one had ever told him he could do anything that he wanted to, that no one had ever believed in him because he was in a wheelchair and he was disabled. And no one had ever told him that dreaming was possible. And he was, he was on the edge of taking it all because his life had been defined by his wheelchair. And, that was my one moment in life that, like, I'll never quit because of Joey.
Yep.
I'll never stop
Yep.
because I know that there's somebody sitting out there that's like a Joey that's just waiting for the hope that you have to deliver.
Mhm.
And
And
everyone
there's
that
another
takes,
50.
huh?
Yeah. And there, I was going to say, and there's another 50 Joeys that never came up.
Oh, absolutely. And, they
Yeah.
show up like that kid did at the airport 10 years later after I spoke at his youth camp. And, they're the things that we say that sometimes we plant the seed when people are in their darkest moments, that they get hope, that they get life, that they get encouragement. And, that, I believe that we're all just one moment away from a different life because of a relationship that we have with somebody. And as a communicator, there's no greater joy than to bring that
Yeah.
hope from the microphone. And, sometimes it's through a joke, sometimes it's through a powerful story. Sometimes it's just from telling someone they matter and that
Yep.
they have a purpose in being here. And so, well, Ken, we always end the Making Elephants Fly podcast with this question. We all know the famous movie Dumbo. When Dumbo gets handed a magic feather from his mentor, Timothy Mouse, what's your magic feather? What's the thing that makes you soar, that makes you fly? What's the one thing that's made you just want to keep chasing after this over and over, that's made you get on a plane over and over again, that's made you still get on the stage even though when you thought that you weren't good enough? What's that one thing?
It is. It is changed lives. It has changed lives. I was headed for a pretty darn good career as a comedian doing nightclubs, and not that I don't enjoy those. It was great. I got great response, but I wanted to change lives. I came outside one time, and there was one of the girls that was the waitress serving drinks to people, and she was sitting on the steps, and nobody had tipped her. She didn't have enough to get home. So I gave her enough to get home. I got a taxi for her. And on the way home that night, I decided that I wanted to do something that would allow me to talk about the things that can change lives, to talk about my faith, to encourage people to trust God, and to encourage them like you do, that they can dream big. And what makes me get back on the stages is that. It used to be the standing ovation. But there was a very famous comedian who took his own life, and the last thing he said was, I can't hear them laughing anymore. I
Hmm.
know how to interpret that. Their laughter no longer sustains me.
Hmm.
Well, what do you do if that's all you do?
Hmm.
But knowing that when you step up there, there's 50 of those little guys like you talk to, and a bunch of young ladies that lives maybe changed, moms and dads, a grandpa, a little girl who wrote me a note in the green room that said I came and I was going to decide tonight how and when I was going to die.
Hmm.
And I started laughing and I couldn't stop laughing. And then I realized that God wasn't done with me yet.
Hmm.
That's what gets me back on the stage. I'm not on as much as anymore. I live on a lake down in southern Tennessee now, and I have devoted this part of my life to ministering to this community. I don't want to get on airlines a whole lot more. I still do, but much less than I did. And um, but that's it. The lives I want to change now is to have my wife recognize me when I come in the door, and to have my grandchildren know me as something other than the man who was on airplanes.
Hmm. Well, guys, if you want to learn from Ken Davis, you can come join us at The Thing Nashville. You can go to stagespageswages.com, use the code podcast to get a discount and join Ken and I here in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. And if you have learned anything from our time together, Ken is literally one of the most brilliant communicators on our planet. He has graciously agreed to be with us, and I'm super excited to be with him and my friend McNair Wilson and others. And we'll be pouring into you guys and helping you learn to be better communicators. And because you have a message that needs to be heard, you have someone that's waiting on the message that you have and the hope that you have and the thing that you know that nobody else may know, or the thing that you say that nobody else may say quite like you do. And so thank you guys for joining us on the show today, and we will see you next time on the Making Elephants Fly podcast.